Good evening. Welcome to the Westborough Advisory Finance Committee meeting of May 4th, 2023, our meeting number 30 of fiscal 23. This is the opening day of the new AFC season as we wrap up fiscal 23 and begin preparing for fall town meeting. First, the necessary announcement. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body, as well as members of the public, may access this meeting in person or via virtual means. In-person attendance will be at the location above. Well, that's in location listed in the agenda. And it is possible that all members of the public body may attend remotely, with the in-person attendance consisting of members of the public. This meeting may be accessed remotely via the link shown in the posted agenda. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by in-person attendance or by accessing the meeting remotely as noted above. Additionally, the meeting will be broadcast live in real time via Verizon Channel 28, Charter Channel 192, or via Westborough TV's online platforms at westboroughTV.org and youtube.com/WestboroughTV. Reminder, this meeting will be live streamed and recorded by Westborough TV, and we thank them for their continued support. Okay, good evening. My name is Walter Leslie. I had the honor of being elected chair, and Jean McMahon elected vice chair by our vote at the end of our March 25th meeting. I'd like to thank our previous chair, Mike Beretti. Mike served as chair for 2.5 years. In my opinion, did a great job in keeping us organized and informed through his thoughtful efforts. And I hope to continue Mike's efforts to improve our AFC processes and recommendations to the town. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Walter.
All right. With the last meeting, we also had the departure of our member Zafar Siddiqui from the board, and we thank him for his time on the AFC. We are very fortunate to have a new member joining us tonight, and I invite moderator John Arnold up for the introduction.
Hello, John Arnold, 251 West Main Street, town moderator. I'd like to thank all of you here and any of the members who are watching remotely or watching on tape for all your work going into the March town meeting. But tonight I'm here to say it's my pleasure to have appointed Jane Clapp, new member. Jane is taking over for Rod's term that was full 3 years. Rod has agreed to stay on, but he took on the 2 years left in Zafar's term. And I'm working through the rest of it. I also mentioned, talked to Mike, I've always interpreted the end of the term, it being that it's the end of the town meeting or until a successor is sworn in. And Mike, to help with the transition, has agreed to serve at least through the end of the fiscal year. So thank you, Mike, for that. But I'm mostly here to introduce Jane Clapp, who I won't try to ruin her resume. I'll let her introduce herself. But introduced to Jane, I think from an email from Patrick Welch, one of the select board members, a neighbor, I believe, spoke with Jane a number of times. I was excited that she not only was interested in the role, has a bit of a background in finance and accounting, and I'll let her describe that. And very, very pleased. I think she's the first time I've talked to anybody of interest and then who has actually watched and or shown up in person at almost every meeting. So really excited to have you join, Jane, and I'll let you do the rest of the introduction of yourself so I don't wreck it. So thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Sean. So I'm Jane Clapp. I am the University Controller at WPI and relatively new to Westborough. We moved here over in the summer last year. I do have a background in municipal finance, so I was the assistant controller and treasurer at a state agency for the last 6 years. So heavy background in municipal budgeting and finance and accounting. So glad to join.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. I just wanted to mention we'll be getting the paperwork finalized, but in full disclosure, Jane disclosed to me during the interview process that her husband works for the DPW. And I've gotten an opinion from town council. Jane's been informed, and once I get the disclosure form, I'll send it to the rest of the committee filled out. But Jane's been informed of what she can and can't participate in. There's very few things the town council believes she can't participate in terms of that, but by having just, once she has filled out the full disclosure form, that will cover the state ethics law about whether people can presume that she's acting in the town's best interests and not in personal best interests. So just in public, I wanted to mention that she's going to be filling out, I just got the form to her last night, so I don't have it filled out and signed, but the only things she won't be able to do will be some very specific things dealing with the DPW budget. But other than that, she'll have full ability to participate. So I'll be back later on the next time I'm on the agenda. But thank you again very much. And thank you.
Awesome. And welcome, Jane. I'll echo his comments that you participated pretty much in the whole lead up to town meeting, showing up here, and appreciate your interest. And thank you for stepping up to serve. I do have an update of very good news on our board secretary. I've been working with Kim in the town as the assistant town manager. And we have a verbal acceptance of an offer from a candidate with municipal experience, already working in an adjacent town. I think we should waive because eventually she's going to watch this either live or later we think, to do tonight's meeting. So welcome to her. We're going to not really put out names yet until the paperwork's all dotted and I's and T's crossed. But we hope that she may be able to join us in person at least once at the next meeting, but generally we'll be doing the meetings remotely as one, make it more efficient, and two, not having to sit through the meeting and then do the minutes. You can kind of do it all in one shot. To that end, we're going to have to be a little more careful about motions and seconds, and I would suggest that we start throwing out our name when, McMahon second or something like that. I've done the minutes, as you know, for the last couple of years, and I usually record the votes while I was here, but when I didn't, it's sometimes difficult to know which person actually said, whether it was you or Rod or something, just by voice, and when you're remote, and certainly for someone who doesn't know us as well, I think that will help. So that's something we can keep in mind, and maybe summarize the vote or something at the end, do something like that. But that's very exciting and good news, and we're looking forward to that help. Okay, the next section of the meeting is public comment. Seeing only one person of the public here, we'll assume that he doesn't want to make additional comments beyond the next section. Okay, so we have requests for 2 reserve fund transfers. I got to introduce the first one as saying, after I said all those nice things about Mike, my first day on the job, I get an email from the town finance director telling me she can't pay the bill because we're over budget on the R&R book. And so I'm like, what? What's a budget? What's a bill? What's a this? I'm new here.
That was just a little test.
Okay. So it turns out, because we had 3 meetings, I think, is probably what put us over, and probably things went up a little bit in cost. We're approximately $195 over our budget for the printing, and we need to approve this in order to get them paid. And so, I don't know if you somebody want to make a motion for that? You want to do that?
I'm going to read it, huh?
Well, you just have to say the amount and the budget and where it's going to, from AFC Reserve.
Yep, I'd make a motion to transfer from the AFC Reserve $195 to be used to pay for the Curry invoice.
Do you have to say what account it's going to? Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you got to put the glasses. AFC printing.
AFC printing and copying.
Yeah, there you go.
Do we need the number?
It's on the form. I don't think we need it in the motion.
Bradley, second.
Okay. Second. Any discussion? All right. We're all here. There's no Beth, right? So we don't need a roll call vote. All in favor? Anybody against? No. Okay, so it's 6-0-0 in favor. 6 being present. Okay. The next one we don't get to bash Mike for, but it was fun.
But we will anyways.
Of course. Why not? Why not? All right. I will give you a copy of that so you can think about that while I introduce it. The next transfer is also from the AFC Reserve. It is to pay the Worcester County retirement assessment. This year, we actually have a member of our town staff on active duty deployment. And as such, certain parts of his salary, or her salary, I don't know, the person's salary is covered by the armed forces, and the town makes up either the difference. So anyway, the person's kept whole, but part of this ends up leaving a amount that we should be contributing to the retirement, so the person is kept whole. And we don't pre-budget this because apparently it's somewhat rare, and so we do it this method. It's $4,076, and I'll take a motion on that.
I make a motion to transfer from the reserve fund $4,076 to the Worcester County retirement assessment.
Bradley, second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Just a question, do we know what our current balance is?
Yes, we do.
It's not gonna change my vote, I'll go on
No,
record
no,
as
I
saying that, it just,
understand. The current budget is approximately $210,000 in AFC reserve, and, before this. So
Thank you.
About 205,000 right now. And I so far have not gotten any other requests for the reserve. I have, we'll talk about it later, a new transfer request, but it's interdepartmental. And snow and ice specifically is not above budget, so they will not be looking
Tra-la.
for an AFC reserve, transfer, but they are looking for an interdepartment one. But cover that later. Okay, further questions, all in favor? Any opposed? None. 6-0, 6 being present. Okay. Good. All right. Next up is our annual discussion debrief of our annual town meeting, this being the first meeting since annual town meeting. And we will start with moderator John Arnold giving his thoughts and considerations, and we'll continue with a little bit of discussion of how, what we might think about for ideas moving forward afterwards. So John, you get the floor.
Okay, yeah, thanks. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you, except for Jane, of course, because she was new. I spoke with all of the committee members after town meeting in one-on-ones. I've made a tradition of doing that every year. It's been possible. It was a little dicey during the first year of COVID, but essentially what I like to do is have one-on-one meetings with all of the finance committee members, so people can give me some candid comments, not only on town meeting, but on the finance committee itself, so I can sort of roll up an aggregate of comments and provide them in an anonymous way to give us an avenue. I've also been to the school committee and to the select board meeting to get comments, and I've also received some comments from a few people in town. So I'm going to start off just by summarizing the key points. I wrote these up last night after reviewing all my notes, and I didn't send them to you ahead of time because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. So after I see if I'm going to edit this while I sit here tonight, I'll send this along to Walter and Jean so everyone can have it in case you want to reflect on it after this meeting, and also so any members who aren't here can, if you want to talk about it again, I'll gladly come back, or any of the members can talk to me about it whenever it's convenient. So first of all, I just want to talk about the many, many key positives. I'm going to keep it short because we're not here to just pat ourselves on the back. But I think everyone was pleased with the way Mike and Walter ran the finance committee meetings and did the minutes, and I want to thank you for that. And we're looking forward to Walter and Jean, and with the new admin, continuing that tradition. So I want to commend the committee on that. I also want to commend the committee. I think there's general consensus that the committee gets along well with each other. As you may or may not know, the temperament is a key part of when I make appointments, because I realize that this committee, more than almost any other, probably more than any non-elected position, and almost in time, and right up there with the select board and school committee in terms of number of meetings and the amount of material you have to go through. It would be very, very difficult, I think, to get 9 people to want to put the work in and do it well if there wasn't a certain amount of camaraderie and a certain amount of temperament that even if you don't disagree, you can you can disagree without being disagreeable. So I think the committee works well, and I also got the impression from what I've heard that the committee works well with department heads and others who come before the committee, and that there's a mutual respect, and I think that's also an important thing. As we all know, civic discourse in the United States is not exactly a shining moment right now, and it would make the work of the committee and the work of the town much more difficult if it were a constant sort of struggle or a battle, and I'll commend all of you for doing your part in that. Also, get told time and time again, I think everybody who's been through the Advisory Finance Committee, myself included, when I was on it for 8 years, being on this committee is a great way to learn an awful lot about the town. You learn about minutia and details you never ever would have thought about unless you did it as a job. And I think people, especially the people on the committee now, are pleased that they're learning stuff. They're sometimes a little saddened by how steep the learning curve is and how fast and furious it comes. But everybody's learning a lot, and everybody tries to assimilate that as best they can. I also heard one thing from a number of people that I think there is a desire among committee members to keep the meetings hybrid when it's allowed. I think we certainly all understand that it's good to be back in person when we can, but also given the number of meetings and the number of personal things that come up, it's good for committee members to have the option of being remote when their personal circumstances make it easier for them to be remote. And I also think it's been my observation is that it's been beneficial for some of the guests, including town departments, to just be able to hop on the call and not have to either wait around town till this meeting starts or to drive back home, back out. So I think for as long as the law allows it, I of course will encourage people to come to the meeting in person if they can and if they feel comfortable. But I think having that hybrid remote option adds flexibility and makes the time easier for people to manage. So now I just want to get it. This is stuff about the Finance Committee itself. So these are some ideas that came up and some things I want to mention for things to consider. We don't have to talk about them all in depth now, but just things to think about. And again, none of these are criticisms. It's just the constant, self-reflection of how things could be better. I do want to emphasize, and I think we all fall prey to this and just have to keep it in the back of our mind. If any of the members misses a meeting, it's really, really, really best if you can review the minutes or the recording before you, as soon as you get a chance, to minimize the chances that you'll ask a question that's already been asked and answered. I know at my work, if people either aren't paying attention or miss the meeting, it can be very frustrating when you know that you talked about something for 10 minutes and somebody says, well, what about this? So I will just ask everyone again, we all fall into it. Everybody's going to do it every once in a while, but if we just keep in the back of our mind that before we go to a meeting, we should try to make sure we know what happened at the meetings we missed and try to think long and hard, or at least ask if the question's been asked and not have to dredge it up again. Knowing that this is meeting 30 of the year, I'll commend you folks for having cut it down. I think when I was chairman, I think the fewest number of meetings I ever got in was 37 or so I'll commend that. Another thing observation that came up either to myself or to other people is this year obviously was an odd year. We're just getting over COVID, but it seemed that some of the key discussions weren't held until the committee decided to vote, and because of some of the situations, some of the voting was done at the end of the process. So I just want to remind people that it's okay, and it actually has been done in the past, that if a majority of the committee thinks they're ready to vote on something, you can do a vote as soon as you think you're ready, because there's always an opportunity for members who were absent from the vote or who even were present to essentially ask the committee to do a revote. Certainly right up until the booklet is published, and certainly right up until the recommendation is made on town meeting floor. So I just want to make sure everybody realizes that just because there's a vote a vote of a recommendation doesn't mean it's a final vote. And you can think about whether it's best for yourself to say, hey, if there's a core 6 or 7 people, if you're ready to vote, put a vote on the books. It means you don't have to go back and do them all the last time, and then give people an opportunity if they want to bring it to a revote. I also realize it's a constant, another thing that's come up, not just this town meeting in the past, it's a constant struggle to figure out times how to vote when we don't often get the final expected motions until after the booklet is done. So I just want to mention that one idea is that if a vote on a recommendation, if you want to do a vote and the expected motion isn't finalized and you can't get anyone to tell you what it is, something that the committee has done in the past is it's okay to vote on a recommendation of the motion you expect, just to have it down there. So, I mean, as we know, sometimes articles are written that it's either going to be a borrow or a raise and appropriate or a transfer or whatever. And if it's a borrow, it could be that people saying, well, we're still working on the amount. It's always, I mean, my opinion is that it's always okay for the committee to vote on what they want to recommend. And then if the situation changes, it's okay to re-vote on what the final thing is. Again, I'm just trying to give opportunities for how you could possibly do some voting earlier and not feel that you're constantly constrained to say, well, what are we supposed to vote on? Your job is to make recommendations, and if you want to recommend something in an absence of certain information, make a recommendation based on the best chance of certainty of information. Another thing that came up is that I think it's become clear to many of us now.
Beth's joining us.
Oh, okay, hi Beth. I think it's clear to many of us now, having watched the process, and I know this is something that it was something that I did, and I thought about it when I've watched what's happened over the past 3 or 4 years. I think the themes for the message to voters are pretty well known once the town manager presents the budget and once the budget summit is held or whatever. And the committee's done a great job of having messages to voters drafted and then done a good job of doing it. But I know at least when I was on the committee, it sometimes seemed that in that last week's haste that people feel that they haven't gotten their full say or haven't necessarily gotten everything into message to voters. Now this, I just want to make it clear, this isn't a criticism of Mike. Mike wrote some of the best draft message to voters I've ever seen. But one of the things that I know I did, and just as I reflected on it passing along, is that if people feel that, for instance, like, you don't have to know what the final dollar amount of spending is to know whether the general feel is whether people need to think about curtailing spending or where to prioritize. So one idea that I had was that once the themes are pretty much understood, because the budget summit's been had and people get a sense of what the expected requested increase is, maybe there could be an allocation of 10 or 15 minutes at each meeting to talk about the themes, and then as there's an understanding of what the themes of the committee members as a whole are, there could be an evolving draft, and it gets talked about a little at each meeting and doesn't have to get left till the end. So that's another idea that came up. And then I wanted to pass along that some people feel that the liaison work could be done better. And I know some people have plenty of time, some people don't have a lot of time. And I think, maybe not tonight, but one of the things that happened when I was on the committee is that when we had like a summertime, a light meeting, when there wasn't really things to talk about, it could be to have some time on the agenda for people who are liaisons to talk about what works and doesn't work for them, just to sort of share, like, what do I do by the phone? What do I do by email? How do I parcel out the work? And because maybe if people who share what they do, it might give people who are stretched for time ideas of how they could do it more quickly. So essentially, I think one of the ways keeping the length and the number of meetings down is to just think about how to make the liaison work as efficient and as useful as possible. So that's really it for Finance Committee meetings. Again, very, very good job. Appreciate everyone's attention to the detail and to holding it together. Now, a few comments about town meeting itself. This is sort of a random list of things that came up in all the meetings and all the people I've talked to. Overall, the traffic light was considered a very good addition to the process. I think that was almost unanimous. Everybody felt that it seemed that it was more regularly patrolled, and a number of people mentioned that having 2 people do the timing really was an important check and balance to make sure, because it's easy to sort of nod off and stop paying them. I mean, I know when I used to try to time it on my phone, you could sort of lose it. If you have 2 people doing it, it's easy to do. I know there was commentary about how the people at the podium couldn't see the light, so I've got a plan. I'm going to start shopping around for a small little desk stand, red, yellow, green light, to put on the desk where Mark Stockman usually is, right? And then we'll have to have 2 remotes because they're not ultra complicated pieces of electronics. But that way, we're hoping for the future town meetings to have a similar red, yellow, green light at the podium itself. A couple of comments. I think now that we've got like 3 or so years under our belts, I think that there's almost unanimous understanding that the 9 a.m. starts have their benefits, but it also has led to some long days. This year I was ecstatic that we were done at 8:30, but it still seemed like it was a long day. And when you think about it, other than the hour and a half for dinner, it really was like a 10 and a half hour meeting. Better than last year's 14 and a half hour meeting, but still 10-hour meeting. So some ideas that have been talked about either mentioned in my discussions with finance committee members or with the select board or other people. Some of the ideas are maybe the town should think about structuring it as like, if we're going to have up to 3 sessions a day, maybe there should be some sort of expectation that we do blocks of meetings. Like say, we're going to do 4 to 5 hours, and then barring a vote of the meeting to not adjourn, we would essentially plan a break there. Or we can have a conversation in general as a town about if we're going to start at Saturday at 9, do we really expect people to give their full time and attention for the morning and the afternoon and the night? Or should we think about whether there should just be 2 blocks and maybe give people their Saturday evening or give people a Saturday afternoon and have a longer gap? Other people, and some people have thought that the 2 years when we've tried to squeeze in this hour-and-a-half break, rather than a 2-hour break, thinks that it's all very rushed. People don't really get a chance to unwind, don't get a chance to necessarily eat the way they want. I know the past 2 years I haven't left the school. I've actually brought a sandwich and I just walk around and try to burn off some of the adrenaline and some of the energy. I think part of the reason why we've felt the pressure to get as much in on that Saturday as we can is we all know the electronic voting, although most of the people I talk to think it's very useful. We all know that it's relatively expensive. So I did want to mention that Wendy and I had started thinking about researching other vendors that other communities in Massachusetts use, but because of COVID and our own schedules didn't get around to that. But the new town clerk, Deb Ledoux, and I are going to, now that COVID is a little bit under control, we're going to try, and as it's town meeting season here in Massachusetts, we're going to try to connect with some of the other towns and see what the options are to make it that we don't feel that we have to get our absolute dollars worth out, because we could do it a little less expensively. And that the one criticism I wanted to bring up about town meeting is that a few voters were disappointed that for 2 years in a row, the committee didn't summarize why somebody was against a particular proposal when it was asked. Now, I know I've talked about this with many people on the committee and many people in general. I realize that there have been extenuating circumstances in both cases where the person who voted no wasn't there, or the person didn't want to say more. And I don't fault anyone for, in a situation where there weren't voted upon minutes and there wasn't an official record of the meeting, for someone to extemporaneously try to state what they think someone else thought. But it got me thinking about what the options were, and one suggestion I might make is that it could be that there's a time when, if we think people are going to ask that, and if we know there's contentious things where it's like a 6-3 or a 7-2 vote, it could make sense to essentially have the proponents and the opponents of a particular recommendation write a brief blurb and put it in the report itself. A, it sort of pre-answers the question so it doesn't have to be asked. And B, if it was done as part of the preparation of the report, there would be time for people to indicate that it did or didn't adequately summarize their points of view. So that's another thing to think about. Again, it makes us push more of doing the booklet earlier, but I think that's a good thing. And now I'll just finish with a couple of ideas that came up that were sort of randomly about town meeting or the committee. We all know that there was a miscommunication or a change of the babysitter where we said they were going to be babysitting, and then the high school students had to leave or didn't think they were staying for as long. And eventually the school department got it resolved. But there was one idea that I will try to follow up on to see if community ed or some other group can help organize the town meeting babysitting, so it's not reliant only on high school volunteers, and so it's easier to know ahead of time what the expectations are and what the town will know to expect. Another idea that was presented to me was interested if there's a way to keep the requested amount of money visible on the screen at all times during a discussion as sort of a not so subtle reminder of exactly the dollar amount being discussed. This would obviously be in money articles, not necessarily with zoning. But the idea is if there's a presentation for like $375,000 while they're going through the slides, would there be a way to superimpose that the requested amount, maybe not during the presentations, but maybe during the discussion, to have a reminder of this is what we're voting on. So that's something to think about. I've been encouraged that not only me, but other people have come to me and asking to continue to find ways to improve committee membership's reflection of the community in terms of cultural background, age, gender, et cetera, and I'm continuing to try to do that. As you can imagine, it's quite difficult to find volunteers for the community who have school-age children and youngsters, and we'll thank Tom for hanging in there, because there are lots of responsibilities. But I think it's important that the committee not be seen as just a bunch of middle-aged white guys, and I'm glad that we've got Beth and Jane and Tom here that it's not just a bunch of, almost retirees or whatever. So I'll continue to do that. And then an interesting idea that came up in one of my conversations to think about was to see maybe if there's any interest in like a high school student who's thinking of pursuing a degree in political science or government studies or something like that, would be interested almost in a kind of internship to maybe attend meetings in some unofficial capacity. It would be another way to get another voice in. And I know in the past the school committee has had non-voting students who sort of sat in at the meetings and who occasionally chimed in on their thoughts. And so that's another way to sort of extend the diversity. So I know I've probably talked too long, but I mean, it was a long meeting. And so those are the ideas. If others come up while we're discussing, I'll write them down and then I'll send this. Yeah, Andrew.
Following up on the idea you had about us being able to vote on what we believe the motion will be, is there a way that message could also go to the town manager so that they could present us with motions that they believe that they're fully committed in and ones where they have an opinion where they may go one way or the other? I would like to try and be as close to alignment as possible when we do that, again, just so that we're not doing a lot of this.
Yeah, I will
rework.
certainly try to remember that. And what I would say, just to hammer the point home, when you're having your meetings, town manager, school department, or whatever, you can tell them you're trying to get ready for the booklet, and you realize that the final crafted, word-for-word motion might not be ready until like the Wednesday after the booklet. But you want to know if you're in the ballpark. Is it going to be a borrow? About how much? Yeah. And so I think, so I will try to say that it really helps the committee's preparation to have even an early draft that we realize might change, rather than you having to make it up on the fly and get it potentially wrong.
That's helpful. Thank you. I think
Thanks.
it's a joint effort.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
The only thing I have some small concern with is this sense that committee members are not disclosing their vote or the reason for their vote on the town floor. And I think that's purely up to them. Because when we have, and we've been doing it for the last several years, I think even when now I forgot her name, not Sean, Jody was here, if there was a significant minority opinion, it showed up in the book. And it didn't identify who the committee members were, but clearly their objection or whatever was indicated. We've continued that. And as I said to the gentleman who asked 2 years in a row, first year he asked, the person was present, did not want to make another comment about it. But there are other methodologies for him to get that answer. It's public record.
Right.
The minutes and the video recordings.
Yeah.
So I'm not, it's just a little bit of a tweak.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation, but as you say, I do think there are ways to handle it. That's to put the message in the booklet, where it doesn't have to be attributed by name. It can be the general sense of the people who voted no, where these were the concerns.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
So I think that would be a good way to handle it, because it would prevent the question from even having to be asked. It's like, you want to see why they voted no, there it is. Get your 3 or 4 sentences. The one thing I will mention, and I know I brought it up with one of you, and I won't risk getting it wrong, is that I do want, because the question, it's been interesting to me that the question's been brought up, of why was it voted no, but I do want to mention, my interpretation of the committee is that the majority vote should carry the most weight in terms of the report to the town. And so one of the things that I would say is that if there's going to be reports of why the recommendation is the way it is, as much effort and as much space could be given to the majority vote than to a dissenting vote. It shouldn't be that it's just 6-3, and here's the reasons for the 3. There should be a case on each side, and certainly the amount of space given to the no vote shouldn't exceed by too much the amount of the yes, because the report of the committee and the recommendation is the positive recommendation, whether it's to defeat, whether it's in whatever. So I just want to mention that that's another thing, is to not have a couple of questions throw the committee off its main purpose, is to recommend what the majority of the committee believes is the recommendation.
Yeah, I am. Yes,
Thanks,
thank
Mike.
you.
I don't want to skip Janie, but you have more?
Just one quick thing. I have ideas about the light, by the way.
Oh, okay.
You're very right about how hard it is to find, but I don't want you to leave without the chance of us connecting, if
Yeah.
I may.
Okay. If you don't catch me tonight, get me by email, we'll do a call or something.
Okay.
Thanks. Did you think it would do it, but did you think the light worked? I mean, in general?
100%.
Okay, all right.
100%.
This is,
Oh,
all
yeah.
right.
He wants to change the colors.
Yeah. I paid good money for that light,
Jane, you have anything?
and it was my money, not the town's money.
Gene?
No, just to say thank you for taking the time to meet with us and
Yeah.
give us the feedback. I think it's really helpful to get this kind of feedback. I understand you do it every year, but first year for me, so.
This is the first time I think I've actually written down, gone through the notes, so
All
I
right.
decided last night that I was just going to babble incessantly if I didn't at least try to organize my thoughts.
Beth, I don't know if you're vocally with us or just listening, but if you have any comments, it's a good time.
Hi, it's not going to be easy for me to actually talk to you. But, I mean, it was great to listen to John's feedback.
Okay. Okay, if you have
Thank
any,
you.
if you have anything specific you want to talk to me about, once you have more bandwidth, just let me know, Beth, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I have a few comments. I thought about this a bit, being probably responsible for moving us towards the next meeting. But I have also received some feedback on people thinking that we should be able to provide a little more insight on why we vote yes or why we vote no. I think particular case asked, it was interesting to me because it was sort of like a 7-to-1 or 8-to-1 vote or something, or maybe 6-to-1, I don't know. But they were interested in the only no, where, as John just said, there's a lot of positives. The tough part about that is, I may have heard what the person made comments at the meeting for, but I don't always know why they voted no. Those are two different things. And you can vote no for any reason you want, gut feeling, anything, but they may have made comments that might have been concerns, which are more concerns or something than a reason to vote, unless you explicitly say, I'm voting no because, or the person's there and can say it themselves. In that particular case, they weren't, and as we know, it just had happened the day before or something, so it was kind of hard to follow that. So I did agree with John, though, on some of these, maybe on some things that we think will be, first of all, I think we need to try and get ourselves prepared on the controversial ones to be able to answer that in some fashion. If someone's not going to be attending town meeting, maybe they can provide that insight in some way, if they'd like to, as Mike said, but not necessarily printed, but a couple of talking points. And the other aspect is maybe we do want to include in the booklet, like I felt, okay, so I was pro-library, but I wrote a minority statement for that, but it almost felt disproportionate that I got a paragraph and the 6-2 or whatever it was people who said yes, there was nothing there. And it could easily, we could structure it where we have some thoughts in favor, some thoughts against, or something as a committee in agreement or something. I don't know, I'm just throwing out ideas because many of us have got many different feedbacks, sort of, hey, we're the Advisory Finance Committee, we're supposed to give advice. So that, it's just something we have to balance in some way. The other thing I would like to change, if I had to do it all over again, is when we take votes so that the night before the booklets due, we don't try to get those into the booklet. We sort of, those will be reported at town meeting, because what ended up happening is, to a large extent, we had to correct some of those, or other ones that we didn't therefore have time to fully review things as much, because if we had stopped with putting votes in the booklet on the Monday, after the Monday night meeting, we would have had Tuesday through Friday to review the booklet, make sure it's really right, and not, I literally sent her this stuff at 10:30 in the morning on Friday. They close at noon on Friday. You know, it's just a little too much.
That, yeah, no, your point's
Yeah.
important. That's because we're going through 3 levels, and we're driven in many respects by the printing schedule.
Yes.
And what can be very helpful, and I noticed it this time around, is generally it's the chairman who goes to Curry Printing and sits and goes through the book. Maybe it should be the chairman and the vice chairman, so you have two sets of eyes on it. And
I think one
because-
time, didn't we even, maybe we had enough time where we got a proof sent to us?
Yes.
And we could review that.
Yes. But-
But that again was a longer period of time to do
correct,
it.
that's because we didn't have those last minute articles coming up at
Yeah.
us. Yeah, so, the more sets of eyes you can put on it, the better.
And certainly that, it's just as easy to have John recognize us at town meeting floor and say, we voted 4-3 for this or something.
Yep.
And it's not in the booklet, but at least
Yeah.
it's right. And that put a lot of
I
sort of
mean,
stress.
the other point that you made, though, about why people voted one way or another, maybe when we do the vote, you can't force somebody, but you can encourage them to say, I'm voting yes because, or I'm voting no because. And this way, it's on the record, and the admin assistant can pick that up and get it in there.
And sort of just like my feedback for town meeting is, I really love if people would get up, and I know you try to do this, and say whether they're speaking in favor or against, and then make their statement, or they just have a question and they're neither in favor or against, but that's okay. But I think that makes a better thing, but we could also do something similar, like my comments. The reason I'm in favor of this is, or whatever. I don't know. We're volunteers, so it's not a perfect solution, but it does. I do like the idea of us trying to push some of the votes up. I felt this year sometimes we had our best discussions after the people left that could have given us questions. There were a couple of cases where the people came, no more questions, they left, and either, a
Yeah.
week or two later,
Yeah.
we start discussing it, and all of a sudden, everybody's got questions, and it seems almost as useful as if we had just voted while they were there. I mean, I know it's a little more embarrassing, but they're gonna know the vote eventually anyway, but, I think that if the committee so also thinks that way, we can consider for the fall town meeting, doing some of the voting sort of that way, as opposed to, and sometimes we want to do it a lot later because we want time to digest it, and all that makes sense, but,
And as John pointed out, we can always revote.
and we can revote. And so we can say, but it might, something about voting makes you really think through the questions, and you got to come a little more prepared, I guess, too. That makes sense. So this is more on the topic.
Perhaps we could make a plan, if I could just interject, where maybe we vote 2 meetings after a discussion instead of waiting till the very end. So we know that we have essentially a week to put together our questions on a discussion we've heard, and that way, if in fact we have more questions, we can ask whoever back, and it's not all crammed last minute.
Yeah, except for it's really hard to ask a lot of these people back 2 weeks later, maybe. I mean,
Maybe a
logistically.
compromise
Well-
would be to have the discussion.
But I mean, the thing is, if we have our vote a week after the meeting, 2 meetings later, which is typically a week, then maybe the it's like, okay, these are the questions, the liaison can go, ask them, because we've all heard everything, but at least we have some mechanism, and it's much closer to when they present it.
I was gonna say perhaps a compromise would be, as Beth said, to schedule the vote maybe a week later, but still have the initial discussion the night that they're there, where you say, I think I'm inclined to vote for or against because of this. And that might lead to the questions coming up on the same night that they're there, but would still give time to think about it.
Or even
Get
just a
more
conversation
information.
about, do we feel prepared to vote? If we were
Yeah.
asked to vote tonight,
Right.
would you have any concerns or
Or
reservations?
what- or what-
Certainly over the next week, I might think of something.
That's right.
But if we phrase it in that way and that's our mindset leaving the meeting, like, am I prepared to vote? If not, whoever I need to ask the question is still in the room.
Right.
So I think having a discussion, maybe
Yeah.
the person's done their presentation, and you ask them to hang out for a bit and have a conversation, see where we're at. I remember there was one issue that Mike wasn't ready to vote. He wanted to go do some research, which is like perfect, right? Because then you have a good reason for holding on. But anyway, and we have to be sensitive to these town employees who, you know, they're working, they already work the day shift, now they're, you know, so we want to minimize how many times they have to come back, I think, to that. But yeah, and if the liaisons can ask some of those questions, that can be good, but it doesn't always work because it's a little bit like playing telephone or something at that point. Sometimes you don't quite understand the person who has the questions perfectly. Anyway, those are my sort of thoughts. I would like to, or I will, because I'm chair now, right?
It's good to be the king.
I think we will be including in our discussions leading up to between now and fall town meeting, some of these process discussions and gain consensus on how we want to approach this a little more with some of the goals that John laid out, and that we all have for, you know, the goal is to be able to make the recommendations good. I think no matter what we do, we're going to be jammed at the end, but I think, as Mike noted, one night we thought we could do voting, but we really didn't put it in the agenda. So we might start putting something that sort of alludes
Yeah,
to
when I was
or
chairman,
voting.
I used to put on the agenda, once it was town meeting season, to say, you know, deliberation and
Discuss /
potential
vote.
voting on town meeting
Yeah.
articles up to, including the following, but it was worded enough that that wasn't a definitive list. It was, including those, but not the others. And that way, we always had the wiggle room to discuss, deliberate,
And
or
you
vote
could
on
discuss
on
any
anything
article.
yeah. And if you need me to go dig out some of the old agendas.
Just use the Latin et al.
Yeah, sure,
Right. That covers it all.
right.
You know Al, don't you?
Anybody have any further comments? John, you got anything?
No, I mean, if
further
you want me
on?
to come back to be in person for any of those conversations you have, just let me know. And I will send, just as a reminder for your minutes or whatever, I'll send this document out when I get home. I'll do a
that'd be great.
PDF of it and send it.
Good
I'll
circulate.
just because it's easier than me getting the email list on,
Yeah.
I'll send it to you and Jean and then just send it to the rest of the committee.
Okay, and it's certainly great
Right.
as the person that write the minutes to get reports.
Yep. Oh, another
written,
thing,
'cause
I'm
it's
not sure,
already
I don't know, I honestly don't remember what you did, Walter, but for
Yeah.
the new admin person, one of the things that was done, I think it was before, it was back in the pre-Jody, so I don't remember. But if there's like a document like this in the minutes, you can just put a line in the minutes, refer to it, and then in the minutes you mail out and give to the town clerk, just attach it. You don't have to try to summarize it. You can just say in the minutes, associated documents, and then just refer to that this document was discussed, so.
The problem for us has been, while the select board gets all those presentations
Yeah.
somehow ahead of time and
Yeah.
all done, I mean, they got full-time people working
Yeah.
on this, we very rarely get copies of
No, but you could, I mean,
presentations,
I guess
and-
another
and-
idea would be
and
to
I
ask
did
for
use
them,
that.
even if it's after they get to the
No,
desk the next morning and
I have asked,
Yeah.
and generally, it gets forgotten
Okay,
in a
well,
sense.
maybe we just have to be a little more persistent then. Because it is a lot easier to say, here's the presentation that was
Yeah.
discussed, without having to try to summarize it.
It would
Then you
be
only have to
nice
summarize
if
the discussion.
People
not-
come, you ask them if they
Yeah.
can send their,
Yeah.
and now we do have an AFC admin email
Yeah.
address, so they could send them
Right,
directly there
Right.
and
Okay.
do that, but.
all right. Well, anyway, if you want me to come back, I certainly will, and I'll certainly be watching the best of my ability. So thanks very much.
We watch
Thank you.
most of the time.
Thanks,
anyway.
John.
Thank you, John.
Town manager can make that expectation of the people who present too. I mean,
Yeah.
it'd be helpful, again, as a partnership.
Yeah.
Hey, if you're going, I'm telling all my department heads, if you're going to present, please expect to be able to do this.
Yeah,
Layered on with what we're doing, it's a multi-staged, multimodal attack.
there you go, to listen to the boss is what you're saying.
Just don't
If you
get,
want our vote, you better send. Okay. Let's see what's next. Approval of minutes from the last two meetings of March 23rd and March 25th. Somebody want to make a motion on that?
Do you need two motions or one? Or
You
can you
can-
do one?
Does anybody plan on making any corrections to either? No, in that
Alright.
case, then you can do.
Or to vote differently from one to
vote
the other.
differently.
Then I would make a
I
motion.
apologize, I'm abstaining.
What'd you say?
I apologize, but I'm abstaining because I didn't open them, and I usually read them ahead of
Oh,
time.
she's abstaining.
Oh, you're abstaining, that's okay.
But
It's
consistently
okay to
abstaining.
abstain,
So,
but we're
yeah.
not voting, we're just, if you want to abstain to both of them, that's fine. Okay, yeah, so make a single
I'd
motion.
make a motion to accept the meetings of March 23rd and March 25th as written.
Second,
Okay,
already second.
Yeah, thank you. Now, we will do roll call vote, because Beth is here, and I think we start with Mike
Yep.
Brady now.
Yes?
Brad, I don't know your last name, so I.
Clap.
Bradley, yes.
Club
I-
abstain.
Blumberg should have abstained too. Sorry, I jumped on
Blumberg.
her.
Did, she did.
Beth, you're abstaining? Is that correct?
She voted out of order. She.
Dolan, yes.
Okay. Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
All right, so how do we end up with 1, 2, 3, 4?
4 yes, 2
2,
abstains.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's, no, it must
Five
be
yes.
5 yes,
5
2
2.
abstain.
There's 7
Okay,
people
yep.
counting.
502.
That's doing it. You're right.
5, 0, 2.
I knew you were overqualified.
Yeah, it's gonna be good.
I haven't run out of fingers yet. There are other
Okay.
people that finger.
So the next topic, before we get to liaison reports, is actually liaison assignments. I do have 1 or 2 extra copies if people don't. 2 extra copies.
Yeah, I'm having trouble opening it. It says
All
its file is corrupted, Walter.
I corrupted
Don't know
it
what
then.
you did.
All right, anybody else need one?
Yeah, I'll take them, otherwise I'm staring at my screen.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go through this kind of quickly, or at least till we get to something that I think want to change. But if any of your assignments you want to change, let me know. The first 7 go to the chair, so that's me now, and that's fine. I would like someone else to consider doing MIS GIS because I could use having doing the other ones. I could.
Could we talk about what that means? Is it a weekly? Is it a monthly? Is it a?
Oh, MIS GIS, very rare. 'Cause they just bring articles, and so far, I think I've met with them maybe once, because generally when the articles that came for the last one, they were so complex, we had to have them here anyway, so there was it wasn't like I was gonna do that much, but maybe, I know you have interest in trying pushing something to the cloud, so if you wanted to meet with them a little more and understand more of the strategy and things, I don't think I did a great job as liaison, but that certainly is up.
I'll throw my hat in the ring, although mindful that other people may be interested as well.
Anybody else interested? Okay. All right, well, let's collect them and we'll vote at the end. It's easier. Okay, next to our chair, there's town clerk and election registration that is currently Beth. Beth did mention if anybody else is interested in any of those particularly. She's willing to be flexible on those. Okay, hearing nothing. Assume she'll continue to serve. Conservation Commission.
I will continue.
All right.
And we have a new town clerk.
And we have a new town clerk.
Yeah.
That should change on the list to Deb Ledoux. Okay. Mr. Dolan, I was wondering, unless someone else has interest in doing the ZBA that's related to sort of planning board stuff if you wanted, but I don't know how.
I'd be happy
You're
to.
already overwhelmed.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so that was Zafar. Anybody else interested in that? Okay. And you'll continue on insurance, I assume. Police, I'm sure Melanie would love to do those, police, fire. There's animal control, Assabet Valley.
That's fine.
Still Beth, yep, okay. And as John mentioned, I think we should probably get them, arrange for them to maybe come in and give a presentation next year at the budget time. That makes sense. Rod is still interested in DPW snow and ice. And that we don't have to change. Okay, the next one that we should consider are two that Zafir did, which are Council on Aging and Youth and Family Services. Right now, Youth and Family Services doesn't have a director, and so I don't know how much the interfacing,
I
but,
happen to live next door to like their one remaining employee.
yeah, Julia, would you like to do that?
Sure.
That would be great.
I could probably just do both of those.
Okay. Excellent.
Maybe
I
in the
think
front yard.
the Council of Aging one is gonna probably become more interesting, because the town did send out the senior study today, so that's gonna be a hot topic this summer and fall. Mike, you still okay with
Yep.
the trustees? I'm okay with the library, recreation. You good with that, Andrew?
Still good? Yep.
I do have one question on that, which is sort of a mixture of that and committees. Rod expressed some interest in potentially being a liaison to this new country club building committee, if that.
Yeah, I have
because
no,
that's
yeah, I've-
ostensibly to rec, but it's sort of a separate thing, and I think he went to the first meeting, so he's. kind of-
sure,
That's okay.
I don't know that we have a committee responsibility attached to it, so.
It's more of an ad hoc,
Yep.
our
Yep.
liaison, not someone that would be on that committee. We don't have an appointed.
Sure, so for content, absolutely, Rod's all over it, I'm happy for that. I will say that the conversation is discussed at length in some detail at the rec committee meeting.
Okay.
So I'm taking the poll not just of the rec director, but there was an intentional effort to not seed it with a lot of people who are on the rec. So
Right.
it's a good diversity of folks. So I am getting feedback from a lot of those folks who are attending as just attendees as well. So we
that's
only
good.
benefit if Rod wants to bring his own perspective to it.
Right.
I will not be out of the loop in the discussion, but
Perfect.
I will have some of the digested thoughts that come through the rec committee as well. So I think we're better if he's interested in participating as well.
Okay, so what my plan would be to leave you as the rec person and add a sort of seventh ongoing committees and just call it the golf course building liaison or something, because they're not actually on the committee. You get interested in that? And I'll call that, and that will put down Rod. Okay, next one is economic development. Someone have interest in that? It was Zapper.
You know, I have an interest in it, but I'm only going to June 30, so I can only,
Pick it up through the spring?
yeah, I can, that's fine.
Because they're doing, yeah, if you want. Oh, so we're gonna have to look at the other ones you do.
You mean the other two?
The other, oh, there's only two now? Okay, because you did so many as chair. Good. All right, we'll pick those up and we'll see who joins.
Okay.
We'll strong arm somebody later. Okay, we'll put you down now,
Yep.
Mike, because I know you had some good ideas on also
Yeah,
that
I'll-
whole grant thing and stuff that they're
I'll-
working on.
yeah, I'll reach out to Todd and, oh, God, why can't I think of
Zach.
his name? Zach,
Zach Bachman.
right.
Okay, very good. So the next one is schools. Beth would like to continue. I would like, therefore, Jean to potentially be the other person on the school,
That's fine.
unless there's someone else interested in specifically that, but that's it's 8 o'clock. That's a biggie.
So I certainly have an interest in that one as a parent. But I don't know, I also find that if Jean has an interest in it, but that's one, certainly I have a vested interest in that committee.
Oh, in the school committee, yeah.
Yeah. So. But is that one
Okay.
that typically is always
I-
chair, vice chair, or I mean, is that?
Well, this has only been 1 year
Yeah.
that changed. It's such a big chunk that Mike felt it was important. I don't want to speak for Mike, but my understanding was Mike felt it was important enough because it's 60-something million out of the
Right.
120 we spend. probably more when you add in the benefits, that's why we have two, first of all. It's the only committee we have two for, and you really want somebody there at all times, and that it would be important to have either, well, the way we did it was he was going to be it, and I was just, the vice chair was sort of the backup in case he couldn't be it, and similarly, we had Jean backing up Beth. With the modern television, you can kind of watch their meetings asynchronous. I don't think there's as much of a backup need as, because I think, because you can do that. So I think that's less of a critical
The
thing.
whole idea was to elevate the importance of that because of the size, you know,
Because
the
it's
scope and,
over half the.
yeah, the scale of their budget, yeah.
Well, to say nothing
Yeah,
of,
historically, long before this particular board, there's been two people on the schools as liaison, way back when Gary Wells was on the committee. I mean, like, way back before that. So it was sort of like just more ears, more eyes, different perspectives, different questions.
Mm-hmm.
So no issues with two. The issue came up with the code of ethics lecture that we got about did we suddenly start violating open meeting rules if there were too many of us on the committee?
Yeah,
You mean
but
as liaison?
two doesn't.
Yeah. So because the open meeting rules, when we start to meet with more than two people, we start to become a meeting or something. Like, so that was an ethics rule. They never quite got an answer, so we left it at a max of two because we were afraid that three pushed it.
Yeah, but what
Doesn't that just change the discoverability
Yeah,
of
no.
information, right? So a conversation becomes a meeting and now has to be open.
But in reality, when you're going to absorb this school committee, you're not deliberating,
Right.
You're not.
you're observing, and so all
Right, but-
all nine of us could go watch a school board
That's right.
meeting
Yes,
and
we
not
can all watch,
be delivering. Yeah,
but we also meet with Amber
right.
and the school department, and that's where we're assembling and discussing.
So with
Right.
the
So two is
And
fine.
that-
meet, it's a meeting, and so that meeting then with Amber becomes.
Yeah, there was never an
Subject to open
intent when
meeting
when we adjusted to elevate, there's never an intent to get more than two people there at once. The
Right.
idea of having the backups was because simply the liaison perhaps could not make a particular meeting,
Right,
and we didn't want to lose the flavor of the meeting. So,
yes. Then that helps.
yeah, okay.
So, how you guys want, you care, you don't care?
don't care, I mean, I have no other liaison assignments, so that was what I was planning to do, but hey, whatever you want to do.
If you're enthusiastic.
You'd be good at economic development, Gene.
Hey, whatever you guys want to
That
do,
would,
that's fine.
that would give
I
you
think,
continuity.
the only question is, don't they meet like at some time? They meet at a time that's, I think it's workday time.
Well, fine, then I can do it
or
because,
something.
you know, I'm
Yeah, I know you can. I was talking about
Yeah.
you.
for at least 2 months.
Okay. So, yeah, so we don't have any assignments for Jean at this point, if that's the case.
Well, actually, I mean, technically, I'm on sewer enterprise and wastewater enterprise,
Yes.
but those should really be Rod.
I was wondering about that.
I think
Yeah.
it was
Has
just,
to have all of the details.
When they were initially assigned, Chris wasn't even listed as the contact because we didn't know. It was actually the town lawyer was listed as the contact, and I tried to get in touch with her to no avail, and then it turns out it's Chris. And Rod is the liaison there anyway.
But we kept them separate because they were business entities, not departments of the town.
I mean, that may be true, but it doesn't make any sense to have that separate from the DPW.
There
Well,
was
do
a-
we ever do anything different with the enterprise specifically than,
I mean, they're separate budgets, they're separate financials, but in reality, the.
Yeah,
same.
the liaison role is
It's
the
all
same,
gonna be
it's
the
all
same.
gonna be the same person.
Yes.
It's just more work for Chris if he's gotta talk to both of us. I mean, honestly.
He's not here. He's got it.
Well, I mean,
Rod,
Rod,
do you object?
effectively already did it. I mean, you know.
all right, so you're saying water and.
Not that I'm trying to push off, but,
No.
you know, for Chris's sanity.
Okay, were there anything else in this whole list that you were interested in? Because most, the other people are willing to give up most things if there's something else. If you want to think about it, or,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
it-
Like,
you
for
know,
instance, like, elections and registration, town clerk, Beth wasn't, you know, she's willing to not do those ones or something. She'd really like to do schools.
I'm willing to do any of them. I'd have to take a look. I hadn't really thought about it because I was assuming I would do schools, but, I don't know when those meet. The ones that meet, I know economic development has
Yeah.
meetings at 3:00
Well, I'm thinking
during the
town,
week. I can't do that.
town clerk and elections is more an ad hoc thing. You
Yeah,
just
that's
meet
kind of,
them on
I'm happy to
some
do that if
Tuesday
Beth
night.
doesn't want to do it anymore. I mean, but I don't care.
And, I mean, it's just easy, it's a quick stop ride. But the, schools ones, by the way, does meet during the day when we meet with Amber.
Yeah, that's not an issue, but the committee meetings are in the evenings.
Yeah, occasional meetings are different
Yes.
than the
Yeah.
committee meeting being there all the time. Okay. All right. And, okay, so I have another one. Active Transportation and Safety Committee, we need a new person. Because that was Zafra.
That's another one that meets during the day.
Ah,
Zephyr work nights.
they meet during the day, huh?
They do, they meet at 3:00 again.
Yeah.
How do you just know that?
I looked
Do
it
you
up.
know what time all of the committees meet?
The ones that we were gonna talk about, I looked up,
That makes sense.
so.
Just a reminder, the liaisons don't necessarily have to go to all the committee meetings. They
Yeah.
can either read the minutes or they can communicate by email, so
Yeah.
it's not the expectation you attend every meeting. It's that you're a liaison to information
Sure.
and trends.
Sure.
I don't want people to be scared off thinking they have to go to the next meeting.
Okay, and then one other, Andrew, we had talked about with Rod was whether when,
Can I?
You're gonna. You
Go ahead, Ben.
you
Go ahead, Beth.
respond.
Go ahead, Beth.
You're muted now.
No?
Beth,
Okay.
you're still muted.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm in the car, what can I say in the mountains? I was just thinking that maybe the library is one that could also be doubled up only because of how much that may impact the town. I mean, it's not as big as the schools, but it's not small.
The library?
Doubled up in what way, I guess, I'm not understanding.
The
We have
library
two
has
different
a
library
tiny
positions.
budget.
Okay.
I think it's gonna be impacting the budget. I mean, I know we're going for a renovation rather than a build, but I think that keeping perspective of what's happening and being in touch with the library and what they're doing, you know, I think in retrospect, if we had been more in touch with the library, similar to the way we're more in touch with the schools, we might have been able to, you know, influence things earlier or differently than what happened. I don't know, I mean, that's just my thought on it, that's all.
Well, I'm actually appointed to the committee there. I'm not sure
are there
how you would have a
people?
second person there. I'm appointed by the
Okay,
trustees.
that's fine. Okay, I didn't know, I just wondered if there was, I mean, I'm not trying to put you down or anything, it was just more of like, you know, in the same way that we're putting a lot of energy, for example, into the schools, I think the library was one where we may need, you know, like, I don't know that I think there's people who, God, I want to word this so carefully, who think that I voted against the library, so I'm going to be straightforward. But I support libraries, and I just feel like if we had somehow gotten more feedback during the process and been able to give them more feedback, we might not have had the same outcome. We might have. You know, I'm torn on that one.
Okay.
So that was where I came up with the library when you were talking about impact on the budget. Because I think the library is going to be a big impact, even though it's a renovation and not a new build or whatever. I mean, it's a new project.
I'm just
even though
curious,
it's
because
not a renovation.
I don't see it anywhere near as a budget impact as the large departments, such as police, fire, and DPW, certainly. It's a very small group. It's about $1 million a year. But, okay.
So I think you're about to
Okay.
talk about school building?
Oh, yeah,
I'm sorry.
so the question was, once the fails is done, whether they will have a school building committee, or whether it'll continue for the Hastings stuff. I know Rod had interest in that, and you were
Yeah,
interested in him doing that, I guess.
100%.
Yeah.
So I will serve out the very last of what is fails, and then if the opportunity presents itself as a future committee assignment, I'm happy to let Rod step up to that if he's interested.
Okay. Well, yeah, he did express interest. I think he's really into that construction stuff, so that would be fun. All right.
He's kind of into that construction
He's
stuff.
probably
He
the only
is.
one on this committee that has the skills and expertise.
Huh? He's into it. Okay, so what are we gonna do about schools? I guess is the one question.
So I was
Rock, paper,
thinking,
scissors?
if we just had the senior survey went out, and we think the council on aging might
Yeah.
be more work than typical, if I steal your schools, do you want the council on aging
I'll
liaisonship?
do whatever
different
you
term
guys
for that,
want
but-
me to do.
That's being too nice.
Yes, it is.
I feel like you could regret saying that at some point.
Already do.
All right.
Why don't you read it first before you, have you read the
I have.
report?
Yep. Well, I skimmed it.
I skipped it really quickly. Okay, so why don't we do this, because we're gonna have to reorganize in a month or two once we have a mic replacement, I guess, anyway, and we can start this way and see how it goes. So we have changes being Bradley in for Leslie on MIS-GIS. Dolan in for Siddiqui on ZBA. McMahon in for Siddiqui on Council on Aging. Clapp in for Siddiqui on Youth and Family Services, Youth Commission. Ferretti in for Siddiqui on EDC. Move Rod in for McMahon on Sewer Enterprise and Water Enterprise. I don't even know what water debt is. School becomes Clapp and Blumberg. We don't have somebody for active transportation. We'll leave that open for now. And add a golf course building committee liaison of Rod Shafford. Does that sound like a summary? Somebody want to move that set of changes and we'll approve?
I'm not sure we can move anything on Rod because there is nothing to queue him up for. So it's an appointed position, so once the position becomes available, we'd vote on it then, I think.
Oh, this isn't official, like you're a member of that committee. This is you're gonna keep an eye on it for our committee. That's all.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay.
So it's a little different than these other ones where you're appointed by someone else.
Okay.
It maybe should go into the top list then, because it is more of it's a spy job or something like that. Not
Sanded information.
undercover job. Does that make
Happy to
sense?
vote. It does, it does.
Because that committee was already selected and overfull of people interested in working on it. So. But it's going to happen kind of quickly because they want to have a recommendation by September. So I would think we might see something even at fall town meeting on that subject for study or something. Everybody good? So
Move to recommend that we approve the list of committee assignment changes as read.
Already second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, Mike, guess off.
Already yes.
Beth?
Lambert, yes.
Bradley, yes?
Lambert, yes.
Yep, got it.
Clap, yes.
You only
Oh,
get
yes.
one vote, Beth.
Oh, McMahon, yes.
Leslie, yes. I guess I should move to the end now.
Yeah.
So that is
7-0.
7-0-0. All right, you're good at math. Okay, liaison reports. Does anybody have liaison reports that they would like to do? Andrew?
So Recreation Committee met just a couple of nights ago, and they have a lot of things in the hopper. The golf season is shaping up to be very comparable to what it was the year before, which is a good thing. There's a lot of conversation going on around the building, obviously, but specifically what's going to be helping and supporting the golf community up until then. Apparently, there is a sample simulator up in the golf shop right now. The current pro is just using the existing space to try and get people's feel. The feedback has been very, very positive so far. What really stands out is something that hits us for relevance is there's an open conversation being had about the outcome of the senior needs survey because of what is perceived and known and what they've heard about the interests of a senior center going forward, and how that there is an opportunity to piggyback that on the potential of a rec center, because the hours of use are pretty complementary. Seniors would tend to use it a lot during the day, and the kids would have a lot more activity after school was out, later in the day. So, however that ends up playing out, obviously they didn't have access to the findings. They have added the conversation around rec center to their agenda as a permanent standing item, so that they expect to be able to have ongoing conversations about it going forward. So there's a lot of interest and curiosity in it and exploring what it means. They're still taking a lot of ideas and branding. They're pulling together a pitch deck still, which is to say that that they have a lot of warm fuzzies about it, but the encouragement I've been giving has been to try and formalize their thoughts in something that is a walkable deck, if they have things that they want to attach to it, that way you can start putting money to it and stuff like that. So, it's a very exciting thing for them. Otherwise, rec is proceeding fantastically. The number of lifeguards is up. It looks like the beach is going to be open, Chauncey, more than it has been in recent years. Additionally, there's
Closed last year, so that.
well, but even before that, they were having trouble with lifeguards. So
The red tide.
there's also an opportunity that's being set up by the Girl Scouts where they're going to be having a borrow a toy thing, like the those bookstores that people have, the little books where people can take out books and things. They're going to have a beach toy thing that they're going to stand up with the support of the rec center, and it'll be a structure where they can keep beach toys, and anybody who comes there can just swap out toys. They're gonna populate it initially, and they're gonna upkeep the thing and put in new supplies at the end of the year. So it's awesome. The Girl Scouts are getting involved in it. They gave a great presentation, and it's just one more asset that they're gonna be able to bring to a fantastic beach. So, any questions about rec?
That's good. So you mentioned the golf, but the golf
Yep.
is off to another good year, it seems like.
Yeah, it is, and I said it was comparable to last year, and last year was a good year as well. So you're right, I didn't qualify it, but that is a fair assessment. The golf, for the country club and the golf and all of them are self-sustaining units now, which they weren't for a couple of years, and that remains a positive part of what they're doing, so it's all good. What happens in the store or the shop or the whatever's going to become of that building on the property has some really interesting implications about crowd size, about anything that could happen with the golf course and anybody else who's transacting there. So they're keeping very close to it. I mentioned that only one person is on the board, and that's the director of rec. But just you could tell the number of the folks who are on the board are also attending very regularly and keeping a keen interest on it. So.
Awesome. Anybody else, more questions on that? Okay, anybody else have a liaison report? Nope. I have a couple. Just some of them are more notes, and some are actual liaison reports. But I had planned on mentioning that we should see the senior study shortly, but it actually came out this afternoon, so I can say that it's out. What I do know is that this coming Tuesday, the 9th, there'll be the plan was for some sort of presentation at the select board meeting, like not a full, complete blown out one with the people who wrote it, but more sort of first introduction. There's a plan for a more detailed public meeting coming up on it, so it's probably worth at least watching that part of the select board meeting to get an idea, and they'll probably announce maybe more of their plans. I believe at some point they'll come to us some fashion. We're certain, but I'm not sure of a date or anything for that. But that's good to finally get out there. In terms of the library, we've been meeting. Very interesting thing happened, which I didn't understand even as a member of the finance committee, but that was voted as a borrow and not free cash. Therefore, you can't pay bills until July 1st on that. And so that's okay with people pretty much like the OPM and the architect, who are a little more deep pocket, but the architect has to hire sort of contractors to go in and do that initial study work. And so that stuff is really not going to start till at the earliest June, so that they could get paid, July. Sort of a few weeks or a month delay of getting payment is a little more normal on that. With that said, the committee voted, we looked at the schedule, and trying to get back in time for October just is prohibitive when you want to spend the time getting community input, learn what we have to learn for what's going on, get some ideas and bounce it off people and have interaction. It makes much more sense to look towards the annual town meeting and not October. It's just not going to happen, particularly once we found out about the payment method making that big of a difference, which it does. It's very interesting. So I think we probably have another meeting at the end of this month, but it'll really start kicking up more in the summer. So we have a plan and a schedule for looking at the repair work. And we do get public showing up at those meetings and providing feedback. A lot of the feedback, I think, comes from a place of not fully understanding municipal building projects versus other ones, and the scope and the need for things like owners, project managers, and and the costs are generally higher for a municipal building because of prevailing wages and other things, but.
You know, Walt,
Yeah.
just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
if that's coming in the annual town meeting,
Yeah.
when do you think Recreation might be bringing forward their ideas, not only about this one,
Yeah.
that they'll do quickly, but this whole idea of a recreation center?
I can't imagine it happening sooner than 12 to 24 months from now. Like, that they are so far away from being having things formalized, and they're very cognizant of what's going on in the senior space as well. So I think if something happened in the senior space, they would want to be able to, have a place at the table to see if there's an opportunity. If not, I can't see them being ready for it much sooner than that.
Okay. I want to mention again to the committee that on Monday, May 15th, at 6 p.m., there'll be a seminar on the open meeting law. And that sounds like it would be, judging by, it'd be good for people on many of the committees in town to be able to go, and particularly us. I think it's useful. If you can attend, I believe it'll be a Westborough TV option for watching that. It will be given by an attorney, I believe, that it may be hosted by the town attorney. And the people that I talked to that have gone to these said they always learn something new by going to these. They're pretty good. So it'd be interesting. One of the things that Rod and some other people were interested in were some updates on the budget. I do get now a monthly budget report. I'm sure Mike must have gotten it too.
Yep.
It's quite extensive. I will email it out to committee. It basically lists all the budget lines and where we are so far in the year on them. And probably the more interesting, or a part of the interesting part, is it has all the previous town articles and what's been spent and what remains to be spent. The only area it doesn't have is like the borrows, because I guess the borrows are so complicated because of where that money is, so those don't seem to be.
You're talking about the appropriation report.
Yes.
Yeah.
Appropriation report. It's like 30-something pages.
Yeah, it's a fun read.
But it is interesting. I think looking at it probably quarterly might be enough, but we'll get it monthly and can pass it along. I'm hoping we don't go totally into the weeds with it, because there's so much data, and it's, you gotta keep within what is the purview of the AFC versus digging into every little niche, nook and cranny, which can happen. But I think it's generally interesting. So I'm going to sort of now move into a little bit of a mixture of next agendas and liaison report, because I attended my first finance team meeting just this week. This week? Monday. Yeah, Monday. They got moved to the first Monday of the month instead of the third or something. And the main topic was the ARPA funds and the status of ARPA funds. And so at our next meeting on the 18th, we're going to get a little bit of review of that, because there's also a proposal for a ARPA fund that AFC would have to approve to spend that money that way, and the select board. But it comes here first. It was kind of, since it was just a Monday, I learned about it. I felt it was a little quick for us to digest it and go through, and we kind of had a pretty full agenda, so they agreed that it could be at the next meeting. The idea is, because we're not doing the splash pad at this point, use some of that money towards the dog park. Apparently they have a group that gives, basically grants for that kind of thing. That'll, but we have the matching funds. It's on the ilk of 100K, and you can get this dog fund park. The good part is those people have done many of them, so they have rigorous, they know how to do it kind of thing. So we'll get, ahead of time of that meeting, I'll be sending out information, and we'll have, I think it'll be Kim may come, or Christie, or both, talk about that, and also give us a run-through. The ARPA funds, I wrote it down, but yes. So the key with the ARPA funds is you have to be obligated under contract on all the money by the end 12/31 on 2024. So we're about a year and a half out from that, and it all has to be spent by 12/26. So it will get a little trickier than people thought, because when things come in under, and if it comes in under after those dates, you can't have spent it, right? And so now they're going through that list and really looking at the things that, either people haven't started and pushing them, hey, you got to get this going, because we got to know the real numbers. And they're also, I think we have about $400K that's not allocated at the moment-ish, and what they would do with that. There may be some more, to add the firefighter thing or something like that coming down. So we'll have some more discussions on that, either through the summer or in the fall, because you got to get going on this stuff. And it sounded like for the high school chillers that we allocated money for, the money is insufficient to do that plus the gym air conditioner, but they could do just the main building with that money, so they're getting the quote split up so that you could consider the other stuff separately. That's what it sounded like. So this is all stuff that will be upcoming. And we did talk about the splash pad. I let them know that, in my opinion, from both this committee and from other groups I'm involved in town, there was a lot of positive reaction to the splash pad, thinking that it was a really great recreational idea. Don't need lifeguards, you can cool off in the summer and all that. So there's some thought of maybe looking into at least maybe paying for a design study now, figure out what are the plus and minuses and what you need, so that at some point you could move forward with that in the future, versus completely just abandoning it, but time will tell. And then there was a little discussion about, be aware that there is a pending bus strike that might happen next Monday, the effect of which may or may not shut the schools down, depending on a bunch of factors. But that certainly can have an impact. And let's see what else. And they spoke a little bit about trying to work through this thing with the shelters and the people moving into the building. That apparently is now not moving it in May. It's at least into the summer before that building will be ready. Not a big surprise that a construction project would be behind schedule, I guess. So also we received a transfer request from the DPW from the snow and ice wages to expenses. And Rod and I have started our email chats with them. Ostensibly, they're requesting, it's roughly $46,000 with the $3,000 or so they have left, $9,000 to fix a truck of some sort, and $40,000 to pre-buy salt for the salt shed. But it occurred to Rod and I that it might be interesting to get Kristen in any way to discuss, educate us a little more about the whole snow and ice process and everything else they do there, because it sounds interesting, and I know very little other than I think they do a good job of clearing. So with that request, maybe they'll be in as well. So I'm expecting on the 18th at least a couple guests on those two topics. and whether we get any other transfers. But that's a interdepartment transfer, not a reserve fund transfer. And that also has to get approved by the select board if we approve it. Or maybe they approve it first, I don't know, but both. Okay, and then on other future draft agendas, tentative meeting scheduled for both June 1st and 15th. Nothing yet on those agendas. Anybody have any other comments on future agendas? No? Hearing none? Okay. Does anybody have any other comments on anything else?
No, good first job.
If
Well
not, then we can take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Bradley, second.
All right. Mike?
Ready, yes.
Blumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Clap, yes.
Dolan, yes?
McMahon, yes?
And Leslie, yes, at 7:00. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.